The Su-27 is a plane that I pretty much knew exactly what to expect the second it was announced. It could go one of two ways. One, this plane releases with only R-27R, and that way it would be pretty balanced and at the same time still pretty competitive, although not the clear best by any means. Or it could release with the R-27ER, and of course, it kind of went without saying it was going to go with the R-27ER. I don't know why. For a second, I'd even think that it'd be implemented with just the R. That would just be silly. But now we have it, the Su-27 with 6 R-27ERs and 4 R-73s at one time. This plane carries up to 10 missiles on its own, and they are some of the most top tier missiles you can possibly get at top tier. There's no complaints for any of these missiles. They're fantastic and they're going to serve you extremely well. The Su-27 is pretty much the perfect embodiment of we are at the point in War Thunder where the missiles and the kit of an aircraft matters just as much or more in a 16 vs 16 top tier match than the flight performance of the plane does. Sure, the flight performance still matters, I'm not saying it doesn't, and in the case of something like the Gripen, which we learned about yesterday, it is a big deal when you combine it with just the right ingredients. You get quite a masterpiece of a plane. But the Su-27, on the other hand, is kind of the anti-fighter. It doesn't like dogfighting, which is kind of ironic considering it's an Su-27, but in War Thunder, it doesn't like dogfighting. This plane loses speed extremely quickly compared to the other new jets. It's not quite as bad as something like a MiG-29, and even at high speeds, it holds energy decently well. It's only when you get to the 800, 900 kilometer range, it starts to really slow down extremely quickly once you start pulling. And because of this, it is pretty bad at any kind of sustained dogfight. On the dev server, the Su-27 was better than the F-15 in a 1v1 in pretty much almost every way, but that has changed. The F-15 got a buff before making it to the live server, and the Su-27 got a nerf before making it to the live server, and it is just not the best 1 vs 1 plane by any means. Is it bad at 1v1s? No, absolutely not. You still get some pretty good flight performance, and you get HMD R-73s, which help you out drastically in a dogfight. But again, it's not going to beat an F-16A, it's not going to beat a Gripen, and it's not going to beat the new F-15. But again, back to the main point, that doesn't matter. It's almost completely irrelevant in a 16 vs 16 top tier match. As long as your flight performance is good enough, as long as you can get fast when you need to, as long as you can hold the speed for a while and be able to engage multiple targets at once without immediately slowing down and dropping down to 0 kilometers an hour, that is good enough flight performance. And what you can do after that is going to depend pretty much entirely on your kit. And the Su-27, by far, hands down, absolutely, I don't know what that R-73 was, but hands down the best kit by a significant margin. The R-27ER outclasses every single other radar missile in the game by a long shot, whereas something like an R-27R, it is comparable to a Sparrow. It's a little bit worse in some ways kinetically, but it's a lot better in some ways from the seeker standpoint of things. The R-27ER, on the other hand, is just better at everything, than everything. The R-73, it could be argued that it's better than the 9M, it just depends on personal preference, but it is extremely strong. The IRCCM works very well once you get within that 1 kilometer, 1.5 kilometer range. People are pretty much just dead rear aspect, and there's nothing you can do about it. On something like the MiG-29, when there was F-16 versus MiG-29 meta, the saving grace of the R-27ER was the fact that at least it only came in groups of 2. The MiG-29s can only carry 2 of them at a time, so that means if you screw up a shot, if somebody notches you, if you get impatient, you shoot the ERs too early, it is very easy to waste your ERs and not have the kind of game potential that you really should have game in and game out. That problem doesn't exist with the Su-27. Having 6 of these things means you can make as many mistakes as you want and still come away with 2 or 3 R-27ER kills every single match. The radar is pretty good and similar to the F-15 in the sense that if you're using the normal pulse Doppler mode, it is extremely difficult to notch. It also gets a TWS though. I'm going to throw my plane into the ground because that's just what I do. I have a bad habit of that. But the radar itself is probably a little bit better than the F-15 because it is extremely similar in the F-15. At least it feels like it is, but it gets TWS and the F-15 does not. So that's pretty cool, and it's especially helpful when using the R-27ER. For those that don't know, the R-27ER can still do the funny launching trick where you just lock onto somebody, launch the missile, unlock them, and you can kind of just keep track of their position in TWS without actually locking them, just so you're aware of where they're going and what they're doing. Once your missile's flown downrange for a while, you can relock them once it's right next to them, and they're going to get maybe 2-3 seconds warning of RWR if you time it correctly and essentially have no time to react to it, and they will just instantly die. Of course, another big benefit to the data link of the R27ER is that if you lose lock, you can just relock later. The R27ER is not going to instantly explode the second it loses lock like the Sparrow does. I know it's not instant, a little bit of an exaggeration, but after about 3 seconds of not having lock, the Sparrow explodes. The R27ER will regain lock whenever it can, and that's a really cool feature to have. The countermeasures of the Su-27 is not as much as we see on some of the other new jets, but it's not little by any means. I think you start with maybe 48 countermeasures, but one of the cool things about the Su-27 is only the first 6 of them actually deploy 2 at a time, and after that they drop 1 at a time. So that 48 countermeasures actually goes a pretty far way, and you get a lot of presses out of the countermeasure key, a lot more than something like you're used to with the old jets at top tier. I wouldn't say that the Su-27 is objectively just the best top tier jet in the entire game. To some people, the flight performance and the lack of 1v1 capability is really just that much of a detriment to where they don't want to play this thing, and I completely get that. But I think to most of us, you can kind of just look at the capabilities of this thing as a single aircraft on your team carrying the loadout it has, and with the acceptable, even though not the best, flight performance, and you really do have such an impact on your matches, and it has a lot of potential to carry games. And if you have enough of these things on your team that are competent, there's very little that the enemy team's going to be able to do when there's constant threat of ERs flying around at any time somebody's leaving the deck. I really wish they would have just taken the route of adding it with just the R27R, and that way they don't have to worry about making the flight performance as lame as it is. I'm getting really tired of these Russian jets that are supposed to be really good at dogfighting and supposed to be really good in close quarter combat, but they just nerf the flight performance, or they way overdo it for the sake of, I guess, balance maybe, for the R27ER to compensate for the missiles that these things carry. I'm not sure exactly what it is. Maybe the flight model is perfectly fine and it's just ARB problems. I understand mouse and keyboard has a little bit of a different way of flying than the joystick does, and I hear that the joystick flight model of the Su-27 and full wheel controls is kind of nice. Whatever it may be, I don't know. I do see a pattern though with these Russian jets, and I'm kind of sick of it. It's getting a little bit boring at this point, and they're only emphasizing the problem by giving this thing 6 ERs, 4 73s, and a little bit better flight performance over what we had with the MiG-29. That being said, I do highly anticipate the AMRAAM being added next update, because the Swedish are going to get the JAS 39C, which I thought they were going to get this patch, but turns out it's next patch, and I really don't know why they would add that thing if it's not going to get AMRAAMs, because at that point they're just adding another Swedish Gripen, which as it stands right now, the C Gripen and the A Gripen are the exact same plane, so they'd just be adding another Gripen that is the exact same that you would have to research and grind for absolutely no reason. So where I'm going with all this is that I do think the AMRAAM's coming next update, and this flanker in particular cannot actually have any R77s to go with the AMRAAMs. They would have to add a new flanker, or maybe add the R77 to only the MiG-29 SMT. I'm not really sure, but don't expect R77s to be implemented onto this plane. All in all, I think the Su-27 rightfully deserves to be in the conversation, and really easily deserves to be in the conversation for the most effective and the most meta top tier jet right now. I don't think you can go wrong by grinding. I think it's pretty brain dead and straightforward to play. The missiles just kind of carry the plane, and that's really all you need to succeed in top tier and really have a big impact on your matches. Flight performance is good enough. It's going to keep you fast. Just don't turn too much and you'll be fine. If you're getting into dogfights with people, it's probably because your team's already getting slammed anyways and you're one of the last guys alive, or maybe you're hunting down the last player on the other team and you're just ahead of your teammates. Either way, it doesn't really happen that much, so I wouldn't be too concerned about it. Playing the Su-27, I really thought it was quite funny how I would go into a match, get maybe a cool 3, 4, 5 kill game, actually feel like I did something that game, flip my plane around at the end of the match as the tickets are bleeding down, and see that I still have like 4 or 5 missiles left. It might be like 2 ERs, 2 R73s, I don't know, but sometimes you just still have a lot of missiles left over, and it's just insane the sheer number of missiles, and not only the number but just how good they are and how many you can carry. It's a little bit comical and kind of silly, but it is what it is, and it's here to stay, so we're just gonna have to get around it. That's pretty much going to do it for the Su-27. I don't know if I'm going to cover the Mirage 4000. If I do, that's going to be next week. It doesn't interest me. I don't like it. I think it's ugly. But I probably will cover it, and that'll be next week. So, till then, hope you guys enjoyed, and good luck with the Su-27.